if you're in need of that. My name is Noelle Harden. I'm a health and nutrition extension educator. I am based in Moorhead in the northwest corner of the state, and am just really excited to be able to be a part of my first family development webinar today. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Abby Gold.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Abby Gold. I'm a health and nutrition extension specialist in the Department of Food Science and Nutrition on the St. Paul campus. And Trina Adler is next.
Hi, Trina Adler with Health and Nutrition Programs with University of Minnesota Extension, and my office is on the St. Paul campus. Just wanted to note, somebody in the chat asked how long the webinar is going to be, and it'll be approximately 1 hour.
All right. So we would like to learn, now that you've met us, we'd like to learn a little bit about what your interests are in grant funding. So I am going to launch a poll. You should be seeing this poll pop up. Are you seeing that, Trina and Abby? Is the poll showing?
It's not.
Oh, okay. Apologies about that. I was practicing with the poll earlier, so it looks like I need to relaunch it, and it's working now. Awesome. So we'd just love to hear what made you want to show up today. If you're interested in a grant for personal reasons, for your work, maybe you're here for the wellness points, which is wonderful. We welcome everyone who wanted to participate in this opportunity today. And then for those who are indicating other on the poll, if you'd be interested in sharing in the chat why you wanted to be a part of this webinar today, that would be great. I'll just leave this up for, all right. Actually, wow, everyone is really on the ball today, and we have everyone who's responded to the poll. So let's take a look at those results. So this is great. We welcome those who are here for your personal development, who are looking at grants for your work or for other work that you may be doing in your community. It's wonderful to see such a range of interests today. All right. And just one more quick poll. We would love to know, what level of experience do you have with grants? And I will launch this poll. All right, so you should be seeing the second poll now. We again welcome any and all experience levels today. We hope that there'll be something for everyone, whether you are new to applying for funding, if you've thought about it, but maybe haven't submitted that first proposal yet, or if you're experienced and looking just for some different ideas and inspiration today. And we'll just give that a few more seconds for others who might want to participate. All right, and let's take a look at those results. So we're so excited to see people coming with all different levels of experience and skills. Special shout out to those who've never considered applying for a grant before and are taking that first step today. We're so excited to have you be a part of this webinar and conversation today. All right, and our theme today is all about you and thinking about your recipe for success when it comes to funding opportunities. So you may have noticed the three of us work for Extension, and we're all a part of health and nutrition. So you may notice that we're going to use kind of this metaphor of food preparation and meal planning as we think about what are the skills that are helpful in developing a grant. So we'll think about those planning and prep pieces, how to package your idea with appeal, how to assemble the basic ingredients of a grant proposal, how to add your own unique flavors and spices, baking the budget, very, very important to get that right, as you'll hear more later on, and then celebrating and enjoying the fruit of your labor. And there will be some interactive pieces today, starting with this question. We would love for you to spend just a few seconds. If you have a scrap of paper you can write down, or can make a note on your computer desktop, feel free to do that. But we would love for you to just think about, what would you like to fund? Maybe it's something for your personal development, a conference, or a place that you'd like to visit. Maybe it's something work related. Maybe you've never really thought about this question before and you want to come up with something totally outside of the box. We welcome and invite you to think about, in a perfect world, what might you want to be able to get money to support? All right. And if anyone would like to share any of your big ideas in the chat, feel free to do so. And I so appreciate everyone who has already shared their ideas and shared some of the things that you would like to learn about today. Oh, lovely. Rebecca says funding for animal rescue. Christina, wage increases for my staff. And many other wonderful responses are coming in the chat. So please feel free to take a look at those. All right, and then I will turn it over to my colleague Abby to talk about planning and preparation.
Thank you, Noelle. And I love to see all of the ideas coming through in the chat. And we'll be working with your ideas as we move through the webinar today. So keep those ideas coming, and keep the one that you want to work on in your mind as we're talking through some of the steps. So the three of us are avid cooks and family chefs. So the cooking metaphor helps us organize our thoughts for this webinar. So when I begin to cook, I first do preparation, which includes, well, first step, selecting a recipe. And then I pull out all of the ingredients that I have in my cupboards and in the refrigerator. I pull out the small appliances I might need and the utensils that I'm going to use. I preheat the oven if necessary, and then I get to work chopping the food in preparation to cook. And chefs would call this mise en place. And Trina will talk a little bit more about that concept a little later on. So to relate this whole cooking metaphor to grant writing, first things come first. And next slide. And this is where you need to consider your unique value proposition. What is it that is setting you apart from other ideas that are out there in the world of ideas? And it's not necessarily that your idea is totally new, but the way you frame it is something that comes across as something unique and different. So when you consider your unique value proposition, you need to think about why are you passionate about this project? And why does it matter to the community that you serve or that you're a part of? And as you think through these really important questions, you begin to develop clarity before you begin seeking out grants. And I saw there was a question about, well, where do you find grants to apply to? And that is a really important question that we will talk about a little bit. But, you know, first of all, it's figuring out what your unique value proposition is, and then finding the networks around you that have funding available for that specific idea that you have. And so the unique value proposition is like the hook, and it catches the reviewers, the people who look at grants and make decisions about them. It catches the reviewers' attention, and it helps you create an enticing package. So next slide. How do you put together a unique value proposition? Well, there is a formula, and it's basically a longish sentence that starts with a program and a very brief program description for a target audience that provides a key value enabling primary benefits. And these benefits are unlike, or the program that you have, or the proposition you're going to make is unlike any existing alternative. And we'll come back to this formula numerous times during the presentation, so you can have time to practice this formula as you develop the idea that you've come up with in the beginning of the presentation. So next slide, Noelle. There is an example here from a project that I'm working on right now, in fact, called Nourish and Flourish Conversation Guides. And so here's unique value proposition. The Nourish and Flourish Conversation Guides incorporate the voices of individuals experiencing mental health challenges. The guides spark relevant conversations focused on health and nutrition, which may enable the practice of healthy lifestyles. Unlike typical health resources, these guides utilize messages identified by individuals with lived experiences around challenges with mental health. And so if you look at the formula, the first part of the formula, the blue, is the program and a very, very brief project description. The target audience is individuals experiencing mental health challenges. The key value is that the guides will spark relevant conversations focused on health and nutrition. The primary benefit is that, unlike typical health resources, these guides will utilize messages to identify, utilize messages identified by individuals. And that's also the existing, unlike existing alternatives. It's a mouthful. So next slide.
All right, so now it's your turn to practice. And we have a tool for you to use. So Trina, thank you, Trina, just shared a link for a Google form in the chat. So we invite you to use this Google form throughout our webinar today or later. If you'd like to just come back to it, that's perfectly fine. We'll include it in the follow-up email. But this Google form will enable you to put in your responses as we walk through your unique value proposition. So we'll come back to this 3 times today and prompt you to put together different pieces of that equation, if you will. And then you'll automatically get a copy of your responses in the Google form will be emailed to you. So you can use this Google form as a tool that we'll use today to help you build your hook or unique value proposition. It's also something that you're welcome to come back to later. So we would love for you to take a moment to think about these first 2 parts of the equation. So what is your program or project that you want to fund? Many of you shared some of your ideas already in the chat, so you can use those initial ideas. And then who is the target audience? If this is something for personal development, you might be the target audience, but you can also think about who else is going to benefit from you receiving that personal development? So would anyone like to share either of their answers in the chat for the program or project description or the target audience that will benefit from the project? Just pause for a moment for folks to think and to see if anything comes into the chat. And if not, that's okay. Hopefully people are thinking about this and using the Google form to collect those responses. You'll also notice in the Google form that we have this formula right at the top of it. So if you want to refer back to it during the webinar, that's where you'll be able to find it at any point. And thank you, Susan, for sharing that your project is family, childcare, healthy eating, and the target audience is children and families. And I see a lot of other wonderful responses that are coming in as well. So thank you for sharing those. And please take a look at what others are sharing in the chat as well. All right. Oh, excuse me. I thought I advanced too far, but I did not. So then I will hand it back to Abby to talk about organizing your ideas.
Thanks, Noelle, and thanks for all the great ideas. And I hope everybody finds that Google form useful as they pull together their ideas. So, as we think about organizing our ideas into a program, we need to figure out a process for doing that. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to demonstrate or show you some ideas for building a system that works for you to organize your ideas. And, a basic outline, of course, is a great place to start. But as you deepen your outline and fill in your ideas that will cover the program that you're proposing or the idea that you're proposing, you might also consider using a type of a mind map, a logic model, or a theory of change. Because in the end, a lot of us, the grants that we write and the proposals that we make are about making change, whether in our community or in the organizations that we work with. So the other thing that is very helpful about creating a kind of a mind map or a logic model is that you can easily share that with other people to get feedback about your idea. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll show you one example. This is an example of a theory of change. I really love this model. I use this a lot in program development and in evaluation. But it also is if you're really into mind maps rather than charts, this is a way to organize your thoughts. And it's the Aspen Institute developed this. And it's a pretty simple model. And you start from the top and you work backward. So the big blue octagon is your long-term outcome, or what we call the penultimate goal. And then the smaller octagons below the big blue octagon are preconditions or things that have to be in place in order for you to meet your long-term outcome. And so that's a really good way to organize all of the things that you might need to think about as you develop your program. And maybe some of you are able to already like conceptualize your program in this way. If I saw, for example, one person wanted more money for their staff, so your program is already in place, but this is a good way to kind of organize your thoughts around your program. Another way is the next slide is a logic model. Sorry for this busy slide, but the basic components of a logic model can be shown either in a chart form or in a flow chart like this, where you have your situation that you want to see happen, and then you have your inputs at the top, so what you're going to be putting into it your resources like staff time, curriculum, and other things that these are tangible inputs. And then the activities or the outputs are things that you're going to be doing to lead to 3 different types of outcomes. The first one is short term, the second one is midterm, and then the last one is long term. Often the long term ones are the big things that are stepwise that your grant may not get you to the long term, but it will get you to the short and medium terms. And this is also an easy way to build in evaluation into the system up front, because almost all grants, especially if they're programmatic grants, will ask you how you're going to evaluate your program, and both in a process way. So as you do things, are you meeting your goals? And then also in the outcomes way, did you get to where you say you were going to go? And these models will be shared in our presentation, which will be emailed to you after the program.
I think we could take a quick question, which was, where do we find free mind mapping software?
Oh, that's a good question. I use a program called XMind, and it's free. And I'll type it into the chat there. And that's my go-to program. There is a paid version of XMind, but the free version is just as robust. Is there another?
I've used one called Mind Mup, MUP,
Oh, right.
instead of Mind Map, and it's a fun, easy program to use. So you can give that a try.
I've sometimes used a network mapping software called Kumu, which is really nice for mapping out relationships between nodes, and kind of qualifying those a bit more sometimes than in one of the other mind mapping softwares. So there's 3 examples, and we will also include these when we send out the follow-up email. So thank you so much for sharing those questions. And next, we will talk about how to cook up the proposal, and I will hand it over to Trina.
Thanks, Noelle. Just feel free to continue putting your questions into the chat. We'll grab the questions as we see them. If we miss some questions, we will be sending a follow-up email. So we'll kind of scan the chat afterward to make sure we have addressed all your questions, but we'll also be trying to keep an eye on the chat and address those as they come. So we're continuing with this cooking metaphor to be able to talk to you about grant writing. And as Abby mentioned before, the term mise en place is a culinary term that people who are real foodies will use. And it's this idea of putting in place. It's getting everything in front of you that you need in order to prepare a recipe or prepare a meal. For our purposes, it means, have I collected the necessary information in order to make this grant come together, right? So some of the questions that you should ask yourself to begin with is, who needs to know? If, you know, in some organizations, anybody can be a grant writer and go for it. And we'd love to take we'd love to have you trying to get some money, and we love to take the money. But in other organizations, you need to inform your supervisor, you need to inform your colleagues, you need to inform the people who might end up, having some work on their plates because of the grant. So you need to think carefully before you dive into grant writing and make sure you're informing everybody who needs to know that that grant is going to be written. And then click again. So another thing to pay attention to when you see a grant opportunity is, do I fit the eligibility criteria? I know Noelle and I were joking that both of us have gotten well into grant writing efforts and then realized, oh, University of Minnesota Extension is not eligible to apply for this grant. And that's really easy to do. Funders will only fund certain organizations and certain kinds of people, places, and things. And you need to make sure when you read that request for a proposal that your organization is eligible to apply. And if you don't know for sure, call up that funder. It's a great way to start the relationship and just say, I want to make sure that my organization is eligible for this grant. What does the grantor typically fund? I noticed such a great wide variety of ideas in our chat, from everything from childcare to gardens, to some housing things, to safety and automation in a manufacturing setting. Well, an organization that typically funds maternal and child health issues is probably not going to fund that safety and automation work in the manufacturing setting. And a funder that typically funds safety and automation work is maybe not going to fund a community garden. So you really want to make sure that that grantor typically funds the kinds of things that you want to apply for. You also want to pay attention to the time frame of the grant. Some foundations, you write the grant 1 month, they give you your answer the next month, and you can get ready to go right away. If you're writing, for example, a federal grant, often there's a 8-month wait before you even hear that whether you've received the grant, and it could be another 6 months before they're actually releasing the money. And maybe you wanted to do a summer project, and by the time the federal funding comes along, it's midwinter. So you do want to pay attention to their time frame and your time frame and make sure they match up. This is where it's about paying very close attention to the recipe. How much money are they offering? Will it cover my costs? What exactly are they going to pay for? Maybe I really want some funding to bring together community partners around meals and have some community discussions. And then you find out that the funder doesn't cover the cost of food. So you need to pay attention to some of those details, because sometimes funders can be picky and choosy about what they decide to pay for. And that needs to align with what exactly you want your project is. And then how will the grant be evaluated? Typically, funders will give you some really clear ideas of what they're looking for. Pay attention to those ideas. Use that very language when you're writing your proposal so that they can clearly match their evaluation criteria with what you write in your proposal. And this bucket in the middle is maybe the biggest bucket, is who can help as you're writing a grant. Grant writing should never be a solo activity. It's always great to get multiple eyes on your proposal, because then you're going to get a lot of different perspectives. You're going to get new, fresh ideas, and you're going to find out if you've missed important details that are going to actually make your proposal better. So every request for proposal that you get from a funder is going to be different, and they're all going to want different information from you. But this is a list of some of the common ingredients or common elements of a grant proposal that you'll want to pay attention to. The first is that powerful summary statement, and that's that value proposition that we're working on today. If you can summarize your proposal in a powerful statement that will stick with them and stick with you throughout your proposal, you've made a really great progress in your proposal already. Funders typically ask about your organization. They might want to know, how is it staffed? How is it funded? They might ask for financial statements from your organization. They might want to know what kinds of activities that your organization is typically involved in and where you've had success. Funders will want to know the background of a project, the problem statement or opportunity statement. This is your chance to kind of tell the story of what led you to writing this grant to begin with. This is where you can add a little bit of spice and a little bit of flavor. This is where you tell the story of, this has been happening in my community. Anecdotally, I'm learning this about it. People really would love to see this change. This is an opportunity for growth. Our community would benefit from it. And then the next section is sort of need and justification. And that's where you get the opportunity to actually bring data forward and say, not only do people think this is a good idea, but here's the data behind why this is actually a good idea. So that background piece might be a little bit more like storytelling. You might be able to have a little more, you might be able to use a little more discretion with what you put in there. The need and justification should be really factual. Often proposals will ask for a narrative. Again, this is storytelling time. This is where you want to create imagery around why this project is so important. You want the reader to walk away with this vision in their mind of what could happen if this project was successful. Proposals also often ask for goals, objectives, and action steps. And this, again, is probably not where you're using flowery language, but you're being very clear with what you intend to do and when you intend to do it and how that is going to help you reach your goal. Proposals frequently ask for an evaluation plan. They want to make sure that you will know and they will know if you've been successful and what happens if this project is successfully implemented. Often funders will actually offer an evaluation suggestions. A budget is an extremely integral and important part of every proposal, including a justification, which is your explanation of why you're asking for certain amounts of funding. And then some requests for proposal ask for additional information, letters of support, memorandums of understanding, financial statements. They may even ask for resumes or CVs of the grant writers. So those are some of the basic ingredients that you want to be at the ready to be able to provide when you're writing a grant proposal. I think, though, that the most important thing is to read that request for proposal over and over and over again, because you do want to respond to every question and every request that the funder is asking for in the way that they request it. So if they ask for a table with your goals and objectives and timeline, then put it in a table, even if that's not your most comfortable way of writing it. And I think always keep in mind that the funder kind of is a stranger to you and your work. So make sure that you're providing enough detail that a stranger will understand your project and, see the value of it, because that is when they will be more willing to fund it. So I'll turn it over to you, Abby.
Thanks, Trina. And I guess this might be a good time to pause and see if there are any questions, because Trina talked about a lot of stuff to include in a proposal. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the nitty-gritty style aspects of a proposal. So are there any questions before I move on? Please feel free to type them in the chat. Okay, so I'll move on, but if there are any questions, just feel free. The last thing that Trina said, could you go back for 1 sec, Noelle, please? Thank you. So one of the things that, if you ever want to really learn about what to include in a grant and what grants are really good, serving on a review committee for grants is one way to kind of get a bird's eye view of all of the different things that Trina just talked about. So if that opportunity ever comes up in your world and you have enough time, you might want to jump on that opportunity. Next slide. So my section here is really to talk about some of the details of the style and the tone of a grant, which is really bringing out the flavor, which is your own creativity and your own flair. And so we're very used to writing kind of in a passive way, some of us, and it takes practice to think of ourselves in the first person in a grant or in anything we write, and using an active voice as much as possible. I know it's a little hard because in a grant you're using the future tense, I will or we will. But as much as we can use the first person pronouns, it will help the reader who's a stranger to your work kind of say, oh, this person is going to do this work and they're personally invested in it. So using an active voice and pronouns, personal pronouns is okay in a grant proposal. Almost all grant proposals, especially the federal ones, I saw somebody mention a federal grants that they hadn't yet actually proposed one before, but they were interested in doing so. We'll have style guidelines, like in terms of the font size, the font type, the margins, the number of pages, the headings. You want to precisely follow the style guidelines that's stated in the request for proposals. And you want to pay close attention to maximum word and character allowances. So sometimes some of the grant proposals, many of them now are actually creating online forms, which is super helpful to organize your grant, but sometimes very frustrating because within those text boxes, they will have maximum word or character allowances. So make sure you know, are we looking at words? Are we looking at characters, first of all? And second of all, you might want to type your narrative outside of the boxes in a Word document so that you can play with the word or character count to get it to be where it needs to be, and then cut and paste it into the online form. The other reason to do that is you don't want to lose your work in case something goes wrong with your connection or with the server out there where that form is kept. So yeah, I recommend that you use a separate, always type something in Word before and cut and paste it into an online form if that's what the RFP requires. And then, of course, the last thing is, once the basics are covered, add your unique spice. But I want to caution you a little bit. It shouldn't be so flowery that somebody can't relate to it. So because you're trying to really use that active voice. And that means somebody who's reading a lot of proposals has to read a lot, and they want to move quickly through whatever is being written. So well-written, concise, active voice, and personal pronouns. All right, Noelle, you're up.
All right. So now we'll come back to your own unique spice or your value proposition. Again, you can follow along on the Google form, and time we're going to be thinking beyond the kind of what and who to the values that are being produced. And I just got a friendly internet unstable message. Can you still hear me okay? Apologies if it broke up there for a second. It's never a dull moment on Zoom, but I think we're good now. So please think about what is the key value. If you're thinking about a community garden, your key value might be something around feeding people or getting young people connected with where their food comes from. And then also, what are some of those primary benefits that will help you achieve that value? So is it how many varieties or pounds of fruit and vegetables you plan to grow? Or maybe it's the multi-generational connections that will be fostered by the community garden. So just take a moment to think about and to make some notes in the Google form if you're using that around what's the value and the benefits of your project or your idea. All right, and thanks, Trina, for getting that link shared again in the chat. So then Next, I'll hand it back over to Trina to talk about how to bake your budget.
So the budget piece of a grant is a kind of a formulaic process. And for any of those of you who are bakers, you know that baking tends to be more formulaic. When you're cooking, when you've got, a lot of food going into a pot or a pan on your stovetop, you can use a lot of discretion. You can add, you can take out, you can change those flavors ad libitum. But when you're baking, there are certain rules that you must follow. You want to make sure that that baking powder and baking soda and salt are in there in the right proportions. Otherwise, your recipe may not be successful. The texture may be terrible. And you can take some risks, throw in a few extra chocolate chips, but actually you really pretty much want to stick to the recipe when you're baking in order for things to come out the way they're intended. Same goes for baking up a budget. You want to be very careful and formulaic about your budget. Your funder will definitely know if you're adding extra ingredients, and that may reduce your success ultimately in your funding pursuits. So there are a lot of terms that come along with grant writing in general, but with also a budget. And I just wanted to kind of point out some of the terms that you'll see that some of them may seem obvious to you. Some of them may be kind of mysterious. So allowable and unallowable costs. We've referred to this a couple times. Funders get to decide what they're going to fund. And there may be items, there may be categories of things that they just don't want to fund. So when you're reading through a request for proposal, make sure that you find out if the things that you need money for are actually allowable and fundable through your funder. And if you have any questions, again, pick up the phone and call the funder. They would be happy to talk to you about it. The next term, 3 terms actually, that funders may use somewhat interchangeably is in-kind or cost share or matching funds. Some funders will ask you to demonstrate what you are going to be kicking into the grant in addition to what you would like them to kick in. And so you will need to read your request for proposal carefully. Some will accept just kind of your day-to-day organizational budget as in-kind and matching. They may have certain things that are not, they're not countable as matching. Federal grants in particular, they will not count other federal funds as matching funds. And sometimes you can pull in-kind or cost share matching funds from other organizations. Maybe there's going to be a partner who's giving some time to the project, and that also can be counted toward the matching funds. So every funder is going to be different. Pay attention to what they are, to whether they are requiring some matching funds and what counts it. And can I explain what matching funds mean? I'm sorry, I didn't go into detail. So matching or in-kind or cost share is when a funder may ask you to kick in a certain amount of money to match what they are willing to give. So they may ask you to match 10% of what they might fund. They might ask you to match 100% of what they fund, but they will ask you to document how you are going to make that match. So I hope that was a good enough explanation. Some funders will whip out these acronyms, ICR or FNA, and they stand for indirect cost recovery or facilities and administration. What these are is some funders will say, we will fund a percentage of your total ask to just help you keep the lights on and the water running at your organization. It's administrative costs that they know that you have to have in place in order to implement the project. It's important to pay attention to this though. So because, for example, let's say a funder is willing to give $100,000 for a project. Well, they'll only actually give roughly $90,000 toward the project. And then you have to count that roughly 10% more, that $10,000 as administrative costs. That all has to fit within their $100,000 limit. So do pay attention to what they are offering as administrative costs. It's kind of nice for your organization to be able to get those funds to be able to keep the lights on, but it also does subtract away from what you can use toward your project or program. We talked about a justification for like the grant itself. Within a budget, if you can envision when you were in elementary school and your teacher said to you, show your work, that's what this is. If you put an amount of funding in your grant, let's say for travel, maybe you put in $500 for mileage, your justification would be the math that got to that $500. So let's say you're going to drive 100 miles and charge $5 a mile. Well, that's not, they probably wouldn't like that. But nevertheless, they want the math leading to whatever amounts you put in your budget. So that could be, you know, I'm going to buy X number of items at such and such a cost, or I'm going to travel X number of miles and I'm going to charge X number of cents per mile. So you need to make sure that you are telling the story behind the numbers in your budget justification. And the final term is kind of a happy term. It's award. And when you actually get funding from a funder, they call it an award. So you feel super great about getting your award when your proposal has been accepted. So that's a good term to remember and a wonderful term to receive.
Okay, so when Trina and I work on grants together, we divide and conquer, and she is not so loving of the budget justification and all those calculations. So know where your strengths are and what you like to do. But Trina is also a very good writer and explainer of programs and justifications. So we divide and conquer. So some things to avoid and some things to do with your budget. We'll start with the don'ts. Don't include unallowed expenses. So read very carefully what is not allowed and what is allowed. So for example, a lot of grants don't allow capital investments. Some grants, most all federal grants don't allow food or meals. So be really careful, read through, and because if you put something that's not allowed in the grant, that could tank your whole proposal. Don't leave the budget for last. Some of us, I like to actually start with a budget because it helps me kind of organize what's needed, and then or at least work on the budget concurrent to your narrative and your mind map. Don't forget to budget for required in-person meetings by the grantor. So a lot of federal grants will require one of the personnel from the award to attend an in-person meeting, say in Washington, D.C. or in the case of USDA in Kansas City. Do not include budget items that you have not talked about in your proposal narrative. This is very easy to do because we're going through the budget and we think that we're identifying what we're going to spend our money on, but sometimes we neglect to connect it to the activities that we've outlined in the budget. So make sure there's congruency. So here are the things to do. Pay yourself if it's allowed by the grant. Now, salaries are always probably the biggest part of many grants that we write, unless it's something that I saw, for example, somebody wanted to buy shoes or bike helmets in the chat. Those are very, very discrete kinds of things, and that might be like an online application for an items like that might not be as complicated. But if it is a grant that requires personnel, make sure you pay yourself as much as you think is worth. I mean, we usually underestimate the time that we put in, and the budget, the salaries are are something you can move or play around with, but start with your salaries. Include your travel expenses. Use a budget template. If you love Excel, I'm not a big Excel person. Luckily here at the university, we have people that can help us with the budget templates, and they have formulas embedded in their Excel spreadsheets, but you don't need to put formulas in. It does help to create your own budget template or use the budget template that's required by the grant RFP. And then finally, make sure you know who needs to sign off on your project, including any partners and their organizations. So if you have a partner that you're working with, make sure that they, if need be, they can provide you with a letter of support. And if they require any financial support, this is something where you need to talk about and build trust between you and your partner for sharing those resources. Did I cover everything? I think I did.
Yep. And I am
All
just looking at how quickly this hour has gone. So I am going to just kind of fly through these last few slides and then make sure that you know how to get a hold of us if you have follow-up questions. So we've mentioned this already, but don't write a grant by yourself. Always try and work with a partner. One of my best hacks is I have my mom read my proposal and tell me if anything's confusing. So don't go it alone. Don't wait till the last minute to submit. Sometimes you think you answered every question that was on the form and then, oh no, surprise, they have 3 more questions on that last page of the Google form. So just be really on the lookout for hidden questions and submitting on time. This is the last piece of your unique value proposition. Really, that uniqueness piece is to identify how you stand apart from other alternatives. So if you're following along on the form, that's your last piece, and then you can send that form and you'll get a copy of the responses. Just briefly, we wanted to highlight, always celebrate getting done with a grant proposal. Whether or not you get the money, you just spent a lot of time organizing your ideas, building new partnerships, planning, and that all is something that can be used later if you didn't get the funding. Don't give up. It's pretty hard to get grants. If you aren't successful the first time, see if you can find a mentor. Join a network or coalition related to that field. Read the announcements about the projects that were funded. Many grants operate on a cycle and will come up annually or even more frequently than that. So always a good idea to see who got funded. And then our key takeaway today was that unique value proposition. And you'll also get that link in our follow-up email. So I know those last few slides were really quick, but we want to make sure that you know how to get your certificate of participation or the 200 wellness points. You can get those by completing our webinar evaluation. That link will be shared in the chat and is also available on your screen and in the follow-up message. We so value your feedback and appreciate your time in joining us today. And you'll be rewarded for giving us feedback by being able to get that certificate or the wellness points that were promised. We've got a lot more webinars left this semester, this winter. So please check out our website to look at other offerings. Here's where you can a little bit more on where you can find those, including a handy dandy QR code to use from your phone. And all of our webinars, including today's webinar, will be available on YouTube. So you can find the recording there, and we'll also be sending out this information in a follow-up email that you will receive from me. And you're also welcome to send additional questions to that email address as well, and we'll work on getting answers to you. Trina.
I just was going to comment, there was one more question about where to find grants. And I learned a fairly new secret this very recently, in that librarians are amazing at finding grant opportunities. Like, they love researching where funders are and what they fund. So take advantage of your local librarian, see if they're able to help you find grant opportunities that match your project.
Thank you, everybody. This was really fun.
Thank you all so much for attending. I think we could take, if there's like one last question that anyone wanted to make sure they got answered today. Okay. Wonderful. I'm not seeing any questions coming in. Thank you all so much. Ooh, there is a question about private versus public funding. Who would like to take that quickly?
I can say that sometimes private foundations are a little more flexible than public funding sources. And it's really worth kind of doing relationship building with those private organizations to kind of create a sense of working together on a project, because they do like to have, just almost personal involvement with what you're doing.
And another recommendation is to always look locally first. So if there are grants, granting agencies in your local area, like local area foundations, like where Noelle lives, there's a Fargo-Moorhead Area Foundation. They have small grants available that are usually a little less competitive than going, out on a wider scale. Or in Minnesota, there's the Northwest Area Foundation or the West Central Area Foundation. So those are also good places to start. Think local.
Thank you, everybody. So glad that you were able to join us today.
Thank you all so much. And don't be a stranger if you have other questions via email. Have a great afternoon.